It seems to me just like typical Trumpian posturing, right? Trump seems to believe that international relations is this kind of interpersonal dynamic, and his friends will do things for him. But that seems to fail again and again. We've seen that in Ukraine and in Russia, where ostensibly his relationships were supposed to move that thing along, and that didn't work. And so I'm not really sure what this is supposed to return in Korea. I mean, I guess he can go and meet him again, but he met him 3 times in 2017 or 2018, 19, and nothing came of it. So
now the US President Donald Trump welcomed his South Korean counterpart, the new President Lee Jae-myung, into the Oval Office today to discuss their joint economic and security ties. During the meeting, President Trump said he wants to meet North Korea's Kim Jong Un again.
I have a great relationship with Kim Jong Un. I hope it stays that way. I think it will. I have a very good relationship. I understand him. I spend a lot of free time with him talking about things that we probably aren't supposed to talk about. And, I get along with him really well. I think he has a country of great potential.
Well, let's talk to Robert Kelly, Professor of Political Science at Pusan National University in South Korea. Well, I was going to say good evening, but I should say good morning to you, Professor Kelly.
morning. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks so much for joining us. I want to talk in a moment a bit more about that relationship between the US and South Korea. But it was perhaps surprising to hear President Trump talking about his great relationship with North Korea's Kim Jong Un, who, of course, is one of the most isolated leaders in the country and runs his country with a brutal grip.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we have no way of knowing outside of what President Trump himself has said about their relationship, if that's true or not. It would be rather curious, right? I mean, it's not clear that Kim Jong Un has any diplomatic or international friends of that sort. Trump has spoken this way before. Even if it is true, it hasn't actually helped the United States get any kind of better behavior out of North Korea. So, I mean, it seems to me just like typical Trumpian posturing, right? Trump seems to believe that international relations is this kind of interpersonal dynamic, and his friends will do things for him. But that seems to fail again and again. We've seen that in Ukraine and in Russia, where ostensibly his relationships were supposed to move that thing along, and that didn't work. And so I'm not really sure what this is supposed to return in Korea. I mean, I guess he can go and meet him again, but he met him 3 times in 2017 or 2018, 19, and nothing came of it. So.
Yeah, I was going to say when they met during his first term in power, that didn't seem to yield any changes. Now, South Korea's leader, he's the new president after the previous leader had briefly declared martial law and was then impeached. Right. And there were a lot of concerns in advance of this meeting as to how it was going to go when President Trump met President Lee Jae-myung. It seems to have gone better than expected.
Yeah, I mean, with Donald Trump, live in the Oval Office, I mean, things could always sort of like fly off the rails. I mean, nobody really knows, right, with the president. And I think there was probably some concern on the South Korean side. You might get something like what happened to Zelensky back, when he got sort of basically ambushed by J.D. Vance. That didn't happen. My guess is part of that is because if the U.S. is going to genuinely compete with China in East Asia, it's going to need U.S. allies, and South Korea has sort of an ace card here, which has it has a large shipbuilding capacity, which the United States needs because it doesn't have enough shipbuilding capacity to compete with the Chinese Navy. But yeah, I think it could have been weird or strange, and it was not. Probably the South Korean president came prepped to sort of deal with a Trumpian outburst. It was very flattering. That's pretty clear, right? And that seems to work pretty well with Trump.
Yes, ahead of this meeting, President Trump had on his Truth Social written what is going on in South Korea and claimed the country was undergoing a purge or a revolution.
All right.
So it seems that perhaps the South Korean leader's praise won him over.
Yeah, we're all still trying to figure out what exactly that purge remark meant. Now, the Lee team was solicitous and say we'll investigate it and figure that out and stuff like that, but I don't know what that means. My guess is what that means is that you have a group of people in South Korea, sort of the right wing in South Korea, which supported the president who was impeached, and they have claimed, as sort of other conservative movements in Western countries have claimed, that there was voter fraud and intimidation and things like that Korean conservatives who support the impeached president even wear "Make Korea Great Again" red hats. So Trumpism has spread, it's spread to Brazil and stuff like that. And you have that here. And I think that this was kind of like an oblique reference to that. There has been a kind of Trumpist right-wing movement in Korea that has hoped that Donald Trump might somehow pull the impeached president out of prison or something like that. My guess is that it's kind of a weird oblique reference to that, but we don't know.
And so we've had this meeting. There was lots of praise, as you mentioned, from the South Korean leader who described the White House as bright and beautiful, described President Trump as a peacemaker and a leader of a renaissance in American manufacturing. What happens next? You mentioned that perhaps the US realizes that it needs South Korea as an ally in that part of the world.
Right. So the relationship right now is kind of unbalanced, which is to say that South Korea doesn't really need U.S. assistance to handle North Korea. But because we're here, I'm in South Korea, because the U.S. is here in South Korea's defense bill is much lower than it would be otherwise. So if the United States is going to provide this extra assistance, which includes nuclear risk, right, because North Korea could actually strike the United States with a nuclear weapon, the United States wants South Korea to do something for it strategically, and that is China, right? We really want South Korea to help us work on dealing with China, and the South Koreans have traditionally been a little wary about that, as you might imagine. Competing directly with China when it's right next door and much larger, stirs up anxiety. And so that's kind of the big strategic debate. And they didn't really mention that at all in the press conference, probably because it's so sensitive. But I would imagine that that's sort of the big strategic story. Certainly the U.S. military in South Korea has been talking more about what are called strategic flexibility. That's kind of like an oblique reference to China. And the other issue, of course, is trade, right? Where Trump is just sort of notoriously erratic and unpredictable, right, with the tariff war and stuff like that. And I imagine that the South Koreans really want to nail down some kind of rule set from the Americans, because the United States is South Korea's biggest trade partner.
Robert Kelly, Professor of Political Science at Pusan National University in South Korea. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Congratulations on your election. That was a big one. And we're with you 100%. Thank you. I have a great relationship with Kim Jong Un. I hope it stays that way. I think it will. I have a very good relationship. I understand him. I spent a lot of free time with him talking about things that we probably aren't supposed to talk about. And I get along with him really well. I think he has a country of great potential, tremendous potential.
Is it possible you meet him this year or maybe next year?
Well, I'm meeting a lot of people. I mean, it's hard to say that, but I'd like to meet him this year.
South Korea. She mentioned about the good relation,
You said the North Korean leader wants to meet. How soon would you?
We want to have a meeting. I like to have a meeting. I get along great with him. You were there. We even had a press conference. He had his first press conference. Kim Jong Un had a press conference. This was a little different press conference. I said, "Have you done a press conference before?" No. And you know what? He did great. It was a great press conference, actually. It was historic. I doubt he's done one since. But I said, "Would you like to meet the fake news? Because whatever you want to do." And they came in like you've never seen anything like it. And then he said, "Enough." And that was the end of the press conference. That was the end. It ended very rapidly. But I think he had a good time. I look forward to meeting with Kim Jong Un in the appropriate future.
bad relationship between you and Chairman Kim Jong Un, and I believe that this is a sign that we're